The desert stretched endlessly, the horizon shimmering under the weight of the sun. Dust clung to Eleanor's dress, her boots scuffed from too many miles walked. She had once imagined the West as a land of promise, a place where her father's small dream of a homestead could take root. But now, standing beside the broken wagon, its wheels snapped clean through. The promise felt more like a curse. Her father lay weak in the shade of the wagon, his breaths shallow, every cough rattling his thin chest. He was a good man, but his health had worsened each passing week of their journey. Now, with their supplies dwindled and no settlement in sight, Eleanor wondered if the land itself would bury them before they had the chance to start anew. She bent to dip a rag into their last flask of water, pressing it to his forehead. "Hold on, Papa," she whispered, though her own throat was dry, the words rasping. "Just hold on." The desert answered with silence, then faint at first, but growing clearer, the sound of a horse's hooves carried across the hard ground. Eleanor's heart seized. Out here hooves could mean salvation, or danger. She grabbed her father's rifle from where it leaned against the wagon. Her hands shook as she cocked it, standing tall, though every nerve in her body screamed to run. The rider appeared on the horizon, dark against the glare of the sun. As he drew closer, Eleanor saw him clearly. Broad shoulders, long black hair falling loose, and skin bronzed by the desert itself. An Apache. Her heart thudded so loud she could hear nothing else. The stories whispered among the settlers came flooding, back tales of raids, of women taken, of mercy denied. She tightened her grip on the rifle, though she doubted she could. "Truly, fire it." The man slowed his horse, raising one hand, not in threat, but in peace. His dark eyes held hers, steady and unflinching, as though he could see straight into her fear. He spoke low, a language she could not understand, but his tone carried no edge of violence. "Stay back," Eleanor shouted, her voice breaking. She stepped slightly in front of the wagon, shielding her father as best she could. "We don't want any trouble." The Apache dismounted, his movements slow, deliberate. His horse followed, calm and obedient. He came no closer than 10 paces, kneeling down in the dirt to show he bore no weapon in his hand. His eyes flicked to her father, then back to her. She realized, with a strange twist of unease, that he wasn't looking at her as prey. He was looking at them as people. Eleanor's father groaned, the sound weak and pained. She darted back to him, pressing the rag once more to his forehead. Out of the corner of her eye, she saw the Apache reach into a pouch at his side. Her heart lurched. She raised the rifle again, finger trembling on the trigger. But instead of a weapon, he held up a small bundle of herbs tied with twine. He spoke again, softer now, gesturing toward her father, then to the herbs, then back. Eleanor's throat tightened. Could he be offering help, or was this a trick? She stared at him, unsure, every lesson she had ever been taught about his kind, warring with what her eyes told her in this moment. For a long time, the desert held them in silence, two worlds colliding on a strip of cracked earth. Then, slowly, Eleanor lowered the rifle. The Apache's eyes softened, almost imperceptibly. He rose and stepped closer, careful, measured. Kneeling by her father, he held the herbs to his own lips, murmuring something low, then crushed them gently between his fingers. The sharp, earthy scent filled the air. He looked up at Eleanor, then pointed to her father's chest. His meaning was clear. This was medicine. Her breath trembled out, fear battling gratitude. At last, she gave a small nod. The Apache's hands worked with reverence, mixing the herbs with water from his flask, pressing the bitter liquid gently to her father's lips. Eleanor watched, torn between terror and awe. As the stranger this man she had been told to fear offered them the one thing the desert had stripped away. Hope. And though not a single word between them was shared, something shifted in Eleanor's heart. That day, not trust, not yet, but the faintest whisper of it carried like a fragile seed in the heat of the desert wind. Night came fast in the desert. The air that had burned Eleanor's skin by day now chilled her to the bone. She sat close to the small fire, its glow flickering. Against the broken wagon, her father wrapped in every scrap of blanket they owned. His breathing, though shallow, had steadied some since the Apache gave him the bitter medicine. But Eleanor's nerves were anything but steady. Across the fire, Kaya, the name she had caught when he touched his chest and said it with quiet certainty, sat cross-legged, silent as stone. His horse grazed in the shadows, calm as its master. Every so often, Kaya's gaze lifted to hers, steady, unreadable, until she looked quickly away. The rifle rested within reach by her side, though she knew in her heart that if he had meant to harm them, he'd had 100 chances already. Still, every story she had ever heard of his people gnawed at her mind. What if this calm, this help, was only a ruse? What if, when she closed her eyes, she woke to find both her father and herself gone forever into some dark fate? But then she would glance at her father, and see the faint color return to his cheeks, the less labored rise and fall of his chest, and her doubts faltered. Kaya broke the silence first. He pointed to her father, then mimed sleeping, closing his own eyes and resting his head briefly on his hand. His meaning was clear. Let him rest. Eleanor swallowed, hugging her arms close. He needs more than rest, she whispered to herself, though she knew he could not understand. Still, Kaya seemed to hear the ache in her voice. He reached into his pouch again, drawing out another bundle of dried herbs. He held them to her this time, his hand outstretched across the fire. Eleanor froze, staring at the offering. Slowly, cautiously, she extended her hand, her fingers brushing his as she took the bundle. The contact was fleeting, yet something in it startled her, a warmth that lingered long after. Her cheeks flushed, and she busied herself with studying the herbs, pretending her heart wasn't racing. Kaya leaned back, watching her with that same quiet steadiness. No words, no demands, just presence. The fire popped, sending sparks into the night. The desert stretched silent around them, a world of shadows and starlight. For the first time since her wagon had broken, Eleanor felt the smallest sliver of safety, not because they were armed, or because they were near any settlement, but because this man, this stranger, sat watch on the other side of the fire. Her father stirred, groaning softly. Eleanor leaned close to him, adjusting the blanket. "It's all right, Papa," she whispered. "Rest now. We'll be all right." When she glanced up, Kaya was still watching. This time, she didn't look away. The word slipped from her lips before she could stop it. Her voice trembled, not with fear, but with bewilderment. "Why help us?" Kaya tilted his head, as though searching her face for meaning. Slowly, he touched his chest with one hand. Then, he pointed toward her father, then toward her. Her throat tightened. "Because we're people," she guessed softly. His eyes softened at her words. A faint nod answered her. The moment stretched between them, fragile as glass. Eleanor's heart ached in a way she didn't understand. She had come west expecting hardship, perhaps even cruelty, but not kindness from him, least of all. The fire burned low. Eleanor sat with her knees drawn up, watching the flames flicker and fade. Kaya remained silent, still as if carved from the earth itself, yet she felt his presence in every breath she took. Sleep tugged at her heavy eyelids, but fear fought it. She didn't dare close her eyes. Not entirely. At last, exhaustion won. She drifted halfway into dreams, her head nodding forward, and in that hazy edge of sleep, she thought she heard it, a whisper carried on the night air. Not in her tongue, but in his, spoken like a prayer. Her eyes fluttered open just enough to see him, still watching the fire, still guarding them, and, in her heart, she knew one truth, though she could not explain it: they were safe. For tonight, morning light spilled across the desert, painting the land in shades of gold and crimson. Eleanor blinked awake, stiff from the ground, the fire reduced to embers. For a fleeting moment, she thought she had dreamed the night before that the stranger, the Apache warrior, had been a figment of her weary imagination. But then she turned her head. Kaya was there, crouched by the horse, tightening the bridle, his movements smooth and purposeful. He looked up when he sensed her gaze. Sunlight caught in his dark hair, and his eyes, deep and steady, held hers for a breath longer than she expected. Her heart stumbled in her chest. She turned quickly, checking on her father. He still slept, though his color seemed better than it had in days. Eleanor brushed a hand across his brow, whispering a silent prayer of thanks. When she looked up again, Kaya approached, carrying a small pouch and a canteen. He knelt beside her father, gesturing toward his lips, then lifting the pouch. Inside was more of the dried herbs, crushed fine. He poured a little into the canteen, shook it, then held it toward Eleanor. She hesitated. "You want me to give this to him?" Kaya gave a single nod. Her hands trembled slightly as she accepted the canteen. She leaned over her father, coaxing him awake just enough to sip. He coughed, then swallowed, the bitterness wrinkling his face, but the liquid went down. His eyes fluttered closed again, sinking back into sleep. Eleanor exhaled slowly, relief softening her. She looked back at Kaya, managing a faint smile. "Thank you." He didn't answer, didn't need to. The slight dip of his head was acknowledgement enough. The day stretched on, marked by silence and small gestures. Kaya repaired what he could of the wagon wheel with scraps of wood, his hands skilled and deliberate. Eleanor gathered what supplies remained, watching him from the corner of her eye. He moved with a quiet strength, not hurried, not boastful, just steady. At midday, he brought her a strip of dried meat from his pouch. She stared at it, her pride warring with hunger. "I can't," she began, shaking her head. But Kaya simply placed it in her palm and closed her fingers over it with a firm gentleness. Then he stepped away, leaving her no room to refuse. Eleanor stared at the gift, her throat tightening. Slowly, she ate, each bite easing the hollow ache in her stomach. As the sun dipped lower, shadows lengthened across the land. A coyote howl carried on the wind, distant yet sharp. Fear coiled in Eleanor's chest. She edged closer to her father, clutching his hand. Kaya noticed. He rose from where he had been sitting and walked a slow circle around their camp, scanning the horizon. He carried himself like the desert itself, aware of every sound, every shift of the wind. When he returned, he settled near her, closer than before, though still with a careful distance. He picked up a stick, drawing shapes in the sand. At first, She thought it was idle, but then she realized he was drawing a simple map. Mountains, river, a small mark where they were now. Eleanor leaned closer, curiosity overcoming her fear. "That's here?" she asked, pointing to the mark. Kaya nodded. Then he traced a line toward the east, where he sketched a cluster of small marks. He looked at her, gesturing. People. Her chest tightened. A settlement. Safety. But the distance between the marks was wide, too wide. She swallowed. "We'll never make it with the wagon broken. With my father so weak." He seemed to understand her despair. Slowly, he touched his chest, then pointed toward her father. Then, gently, her breath caught. "I will help." The message was clear, though no words passed between them. Eleanor blinked back tears. She wanted to protest, to insist they couldn't burden him further. But when she looked into his eyes, she saw no pity, no reluctance, only certainty. For the first time since their journey began, a fragile hope stirred in her heart. Night fell again. The fire crackled low, and her father slept soundly. Eleanor sat across from Kaya, the firelight dancing in his eyes. For a long moment, neither spoke, but the silence between them had changed. No longer laced with fear, it was something else now, something that felt safe. Eleanor drew her knees close, her voice barely above a whisper. "Would it be all right if I trusted you?" Kaya's gaze held hers. Steady as always, he gave no answer in words. Instead, he simply nodded once, slow and certain, and in that gesture, her heart found its first true comfort in weeks. The third morning dawned with a chill, the desert winds carrying the scent of dust and sage. Eleanor stirred from a shallow sleep, every muscle aching from the hard ground. She blinked, noticing how Kaya had risen earlier than her again. He was already at work, binding her father's splinted leg with fresh strips torn from his own garments. Movements steady, precise. A pang stirred in Eleanor's chest. Why does he do this for us? For strangers? She pressed her hand against her heart, as if trying to still its restless beat. When Kaya finally noticed her watching, he paused only long enough to meet her eyes. A quiet acknowledgement. No smile, no words, but somehow, that brief connection said more than speech ever could. Eleanor's throat tightened. She wanted to thank him. She wanted to tell him how his presence steadied her, how she had not felt this safe in years, not even before the attack that had torn her life apart. But words lodged in her chest, stuck beneath the weight of secrets she dared not reveal. By midday, they attempted to move. Kaya lifted her father, as if he were a child, carrying him with a gentleness that belied his strength. Eleanor followed, guiding the horse with the salvaged supplies. Her father's weight seemed no burden to Kaya, yet Eleanor saw the strain in his shoulders, the thin sheen of sweat at his brow. She ached to offer relief, but knew she could not. The silence pressed heavy as they walked. Eleanor's thoughts churned louder than the desert winds. He deserves to know who I am, what I've done, what I carry. She touched her stomach unconsciously, the faintest swell hidden beneath her dress. Her breath caught. No, she couldn't tell him, not yet. What would he think if he knew she carried a child that was not his? That the mark of another man, one who had harmed her, lived within her? Shame scorched her cheeks. She clenched her fists, struggling to breathe past the knot in her chest. Eleanor. The sound of her name startled her. It was her father, half-conscious, whispering from Kaya's arms. "Yes, Papa," she answered quickly, stepping close. His eyes fluttered, weak but aware. "This man, he helps us. You trust him." Her gaze flickered to Kaya, who walked on without complaint, bearing the full weight of another man. "Yes," she whispered, almost to herself. "More than I should." Her father's hand found hers, squeezing faintly. "Then don't let fear steal that gift." His eyes closed again, sinking back into fevered sleep. Her heart trembled. If only he knew the truth. That night, the fire burned brighter. Kaya had caught a rabbit with quiet skill, and Eleanor cooked it with trembling hands. The simple meal warmed her father, easing his pain for a time. When he slept again, Eleanor found herself alone across the fire from Kaya. The flames painted his features in golden shadow, his eyes reflecting sparks of light. She hugged her knees, staring at the embers. The silence between them was too much tonight to wait it, too full of what she longed to say. "Why?" she whispered suddenly. Kaya tilted his head. "Why do you help us?" Her voice cracked. "We are nothing to you." "We are." She stopped, biting back the word broken. Kaya's gaze held hers. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then, with slow deliberation, he placed his hand over his heart, then pointed to her father, then to her. Her chest tightened. "Because you matter." Eleanor swallowed hard, her eyes burning with tears. "You shouldn't." Her voice wavered. "If you knew the truth, you wouldn't." Her words faltered. She bit her lip, desperate to hold back the confession clawing at her throat. Kaya leaned forward slightly, eyes steady, patient. He didn't press her, didn't demand answers. He simply watched, offering silence instead of judgment. And in that silence, Eleanor crumbled. Tears slipped down her cheeks. She turned her face away, ashamed. "I'm not who you think I am," she whispered to the fire. "And soon you'll see that." Kaya's gaze softened, though he remained still. He did not reach for her, did not intrude upon her breaking. Yet somehow, the The weight of his presence was enough like the earth beneath her feet. Solid, unshifting. For the first time in years, she felt as if someone might stay, even when they knew her worst. But her secret still lingered like a shadow, waiting for the moment it would rise and tear all of this fragile trust apart. The following day dawned gray, heavy clouds stretching across the desert sky. Eleanor felt the storm before it came her chest tight, her secret pressing harder than the weight of the air around them. Kaya walked ahead, guiding the way, her father's limp frame across his shoulders once more. The man bore the burden with no complaint, his step steady, sure, as if carrying another man's life was no more trouble than walking through the dust. Eleanor followed, her hands twisted in her skirts, her mind spinning like the restless wind. I have to tell him, he deserves the truth, but if I do, he will turn from me. He will look at me with the same disgust others have before. She glanced at him, at the dark braid resting against his back, at the strong lines of his shoulders. She remembered the warmth in his eyes last night, the way he had answered her trembling words with silence that steadied instead of judged. Her lips parted, the confession rising. But then, as if sensing her gaze, Kaya turned. His eyes met her steady, unyielding, a soft question within them. The words died on her tongue. She dropped her eyes to the ground. Not yet. Not yet. By midday, the storm broke. Rain fell sudden and hard, soaking them within minutes. Kaya quickened his pace, searching for shelter. Eleanor struggled to keep up, clutching her skirts, half blinded. By rain. At last he found a shallow cave in the rocks, setting her father down inside. Eleanor collapsed near the wall, shivering, her dress clinging cold to her skin. Kaya drenched himself, gathered dry wood from beneath the overhang. By some miracle, he coaxed a flame to life. The small fire flickered against the stone walls, offering warmth. Eleanor hugged herself, teeth chattering. The wet fabric dragged at her body, heavy and uncomfortable. Without a word, Kaya pulled a blanket from his pack and draped it around her shoulders. His hand lingered for a moment, brushing against her arm. Her breath caught. "Thank you," she whispered, though her voice trembled with more than cold. He gave a short nod and returned to tend the fire. Eleanor watched him, her secret rising like bile in her throat. She could not sit in his kindness and say nothing. She could not let him keep looking at her as if she were someone worth protecting. "Kaya," she whispered. He looked up, dark eyes steady. "I need to tell you." Her voice broke. She clutched the blanket tighter, her nails digging into the fabric. But before she could finish, her father stirred, moaning in pain. She rushed to his side, holding his hand as his fever flared again. The moment shattered. Kaya rose, bringing water to cool her father's head. Eleanor sat in silence, her confession buried once more. That night, when the rain eased, she lay awake listening to the soft crackle of the fire. Kaya sat near the entrance, a silent sentinel, his profile sharp against the fading storm. She turned onto her side, clutching the blanket to her chest. Her heart ached with everything unsaid. How can he sit there so steady, while I tremble with lies? Her father's earlier words echoed in her memory. Don't let fear steal that gift. She bit her lip until it hurt. Fear was all she had known since the night of the raid. Fear of men's hands. Fear of whispers. Fear of the life inside her that was not chosen, not wanted. Yet Kaya had shown her nothing but patience, strength, a quiet protection that never pressed, never demanded. She buried her face in the blanket, tears dampening the fabric. He deserves to know. But if I tell him, I lose him, and I cannot bear to lose him too. The next morning, as dawn lit the sky in pale gold, Kaya approached her with a strip of dried meat. She accepted it with shaking hands. When his fingers brushed hers, she froze, heart hammering. His touch was brief, steady, but in that moment, she felt it again, the bond growing between them, deeper than words, stronger than fear, and still, her secret coiled inside her like a living thing, demanding release. Her lips parted, the words trembling at the edge of her tongue, but Kaya only met her gaze, quiet, waiting. He seemed to sense her storm, but did not force it. The fire in his eyes told her he would listen whenever she was ready, and that was both her salvation and her torment. The days stretched long across the desert, each one tugging Eleanor closer to the edge of her truth. The weight inside her chest grew heavier with each mile, as though the secret itself demanded to be spoken. Her father's health faltered with the journey. Some days he managed to ride the travois Kaya had built, his voice a whisper of gratitude. Other days he drifted in fever, murmuring Eleanor's name and half-formed prayers. Eleanor tended him as best she could, but every moment of weakness sharpened her fear. If he dies, the only one left to know my shame will be me. And Kaya, how can I live with that between us? She watched Kaya often when he didn't notice. His patience astonished her, how he never rushed her father, how he found water where she thought none existed, how he lifted burdens without complaint. He was not the savage her town had painted him. He was the strongest man she had ever known. And perhaps that was why her heart beat so painfully whenever she looked at him. One evening, after a grueling march through sharp ravines, they stopped. At a grove of mesquite trees, Kaya built the fire and disappeared into the shadows to hunt rabbits. Eleanor stayed by her father's side, cooling his forehead, her thoughts circling endlessly. When Kaya returned, the rabbits cleaned and roasting over the flames. Eleanor forced herself to speak. "Kaya," she said, her voice so low it nearly vanished beneath the crackle of fire. He looked up from the meat, his dark eyes reflecting the flames. Yes, her fingers knotted in her skirt. Her heart pounded so loudly she was sure he could hear it. "There is something you don't know, something you deserve to know." His gaze did not shift. He gave her the gift of silent space. For her words to come, her throat tightened. The words swelled, pressing harder than they ever had before. But then her father stirred, groaning in pain. Eleanor broke away, rushing to his side, clutching his hand as if it anchored her. The moment crumbled, her heart sank. Again, fear had stolen her chance. Later that night, when her father slept, she sat apart from the fire, knees drawn to her chest. The stars blazed sharp and unyielding above. Kaya moved quietly to her side, lowering himself to sit a careful distance away. "You are troubled," he said softly. It was not a question. Eleanor's breath hitched. She pressed her forehead against her knees, torn open by the gentleness in his tone. "Yes," she whispered, "more than I can bear." His steady silence met her again. Tears welled in her eyes. "I want to tell you, but I don't know how, and I am so afraid." His voice was quiet, deep, carrying the weight of truth. "Fear does not change what is already true. It only steals peace from you." Her tears spilled over. She wanted to throw herself into his arms, to let him hold the burden for her. But the words, "This child is not yours, not even mine," choice stuck like thorns in her throat. Instead, she turned her face away. "One day, I will tell you everything." Kaya looked at her for a long moment, then gave a single nod. "When your heart is ready." And that was all. No pressing, no anger. Just the steady assurance that he would wait. It both comforted her and broke her. The next morning, trouble came like a shadow. A group of riders appeared on the ridge, a band of settlers, armed and watchful. Kaya tensed immediately, his body taut like a bowstring. Eleanor's blood ran cold. She recognized the sheriff among them, a man whose eyes had already judged her once before. If they saw her with an Apache, if they suspected her secret, the fragile safety she had found would shatter. Kaya stepped forward, calm but ready. "Stay behind me," he murmured to Eleanor. Her heart thundered. She knew this encounter could not end without risk. And in that moment, she realized something with absolute clarity. If danger took Kaya from her before she confessed, she would never forgive herself. The secret that had strangled her for so long was no longer bearable. The breaking point had come, could not hide much longer. The morning sun glared over the ridge, casting long, harsh shadows as the armed riders descended. Dust swirled beneath hooves, and the creak of saddles carried the weight of danger. Eleanor's stomach twisted. Every nerve screamed that she and her father were in peril, not only because of the settlers' suspicion of Kaya, but because of the truth she still carried like a stone in her chest. The sheriff, broad-shouldered and stern, tugged his horse to a halt a dozen paces away. His eyes narrowed when they settled on Eleanor, then slid to Kaya with open contempt. "Well, what do we have here?" he drawled, spitting tobacco to the ground. "A lady, her half-dead PA, and an Apache keeping camp. Tell me, miss, he steal you, or did you go willin'?" Heat rushed to Eleanor's cheeks. She opened her mouth, but no sound came. Kaya's voice cut the silence, steady and calm. "We travel together. No harm done." The sheriff's lip curled. "No harm. Yet folks in town been whispering, say you disappeared. Eleanor, some claim you ran off. Others say worse. Now I see why." His gaze flicked toward Kaya like a blade. "You've thrown in with him." Fear spiked in her chest. If these men dragged her back to town, what would happen to Kaya, to her father, to the secret that bound her like chains? Her father stirred weakly behind her, coughing. Eleanor, the sound broke something inside her. She could not go on lying, not to Kaya, not to herself, not while guns gleamed in the sheriff's men's hands, and not while her father's life trembled on the edge of nothing. She stepped forward, surprising even herself. Her voice wavered, but it carried. "Sheriff, you know nothing of me. Nothing of what I've endured." Her eyes burned with tears. "And I will not let you twist what you see here. This man has saved our lives." The sheriff gave a cold chuckle. "Is that so? Strange company for a respectable lady. What would your husband say?" The words struck like a hammer blow. Eleanor's body trembled. Her secret clawed to the surface. "My husband," her throat tightened, but she forced the words through. "My husband is dead. And before he died, he left me with more than grief." The riders shifted uneasily. Some glanced at each other, sensing more than she had yet spoken. Kaya stood utterly still, his eyes locked on hers, silent, waiting. Eleanor's voice cracked, raw and trembling. "This child, I carry it, is not born of love. It is not his. It was forced upon me." Her tears spilled, falling like rain into the dust at her feet. "And still, Kaya has looked at me, as though I am not broken, as though my child is not. A mark of shame." The men muttered among themselves, their unease growing. Even the sheriff faltered for a heartbeat, discomfort flickering across his face. But Eleanor could not stop now. The dam had broken. Turning to Kaya, she spoke the words that had choked her for weeks. I could not pretend anymore. I had to tell you, this child is not yours. And yet, you have given us both a place to belong. Her voice wavered into a whisper. You are more father to this child already than the man who gave it life. The world fell silent. Only the wind stirred the mesquite branches above. Kaya's face remained calm, but his dark eyes shone with a depth Eleanor had never dared hope. He stepped closer, slow and sure, until his presence steadied her trembling form. He laid a hand gently against her shoulder. Truth does not change what is already here. His voice was low, certain, carrying the weight of his soul. This child is under my heart now, and so are you. The words sank into her like a bomb. Healing wounds she thought would never close. The sheriff, uneasy with the intimacy of the moment, shifted in his saddle and spat again. Fool's talk, he muttered, though his voice lacked conviction. But it ain't my concern what a woman and her Apache choose. Just don't expect the town to welcome you back. With that, he yanked his reins and rode off, his men following reluctantly. Dust rose, then settled, leaving silence in their wake. Eleanor turned to Kaya, her breath shuddering. You should hate me for hiding it so long. But he shook his head slowly. I could never hate truth spoken in courage. Her knees nearly gave way. Relief, sorrow, and love tangled all at once. For the first time, she felt the chains of her secret fall away. The riders were gone, but the dust of their passing still hung in the air, a bitter reminder that the world beyond this canyon would never forgive what had just been spoken. Eleanor stood in the hush that followed, her chest heaving, her cheeks wet with tears that tasted both of shame and release. Her father coughed again from his bedroll, his frail voice cracking the silence. Eleanor, child. He struggled to sit, but Kaya was there before she could move, kneeling at his side, steadying him with careful strength. The old man's dim eyes lifted to his daughter, then to the Apache. I heard what you said. His breath rattled in his chest, but his words carried a clarity that surprised her. And I saw the way he stood for you. If the world calls it sin, let the world burn. Better you be loved true than live in lies. Eleanor's throat tightened. Her father had always been hard, unforgiving in his judgment of men. But now on the brink of death he saw more clearly than ever. Kaya met the old man's gaze and inclined his head, a gesture of deep respect. I will guard her, he said, quietly, and the child she carries. For Eleanor, those words felt like a vow stronger than any marriage oath she had ever known. She sank to her knees beside them, clutching her father's frail hand. Papa, I was so afraid you would hate me if I spoke the truth. His hand squeezed hers with surprising strength. I've hated enough in my life, girl. I don't want to carry it to the grave. His eyes shifted once more to Kaya. You keep her safe, boy. Promise me that. Kaya's dark gaze never wavered. I promise. The moment carved itself into Eleanor's soul like scripture. She had feared that her confession would bring ruin, but instead, it had bound them tighter her father's blessing. Kaya's vow, her own heart finally free. Yet the peace was fragile, and she knew it. The sheriff's words lingered like thorns. Don't expect the town to welcome you back. That night, under the sweep of stars, Eleanor and Kaya sat together near the fire while her father slept. The flames painted his strong features in flickering gold, and she could not look away. You could still leave, she whispered. If you stayed away from me, the town would leave you be. They'd forget in time, but if you stay, her voice faltered. They will hunt you, Kaya. They will hunt us both. He looked into the fire for a long while before answering, his tone low and steady, like a river flowing beneath the earth. All my life I have walked alone. The mountains know my steps. The wind carries my prayers, but it does not answer. Until you. His eyes turned to her, holding hers with unshakable calm. You gave me a name in your heart. You let me sit beside you without shame. Do you think I would leave that? Her lips parted, her breath trembling. But the danger has always been, he interrupted softly. But now I have something worth facing it for. Tears blurred her sight. She lifted a hand to his cheek, the rough warmth of his skin grounding her. I don't know how to be brave like you. His hand came up, covering hers, pressing it to his face. You already were. You spoke truth when fear would have kept you silent. That is the bravest thing. Her chest broke open with a rush of feelings she could no longer deny. Leaning closer, her forehead rested against his, her whisper trembling. Into the night air, then let me be brave again. I love you, Kaya, beyond fear, beyond shame, beyond this world, if I must. His breath caught, the first crack in his iron composure. Then he whispered back, a prayer spoken at last, and I love you. The fire popped, sending sparks upward like stars set free. Around them stretched a world that would never accept their bond. A world eager to crush what they had dared to build. But in that moment, under heaven's endless sky, Eleanor knew the truth. They had chosen each other, against all odds, and that choice was their defiance, their salvation, their love against the world. The canyon lay quiet in the late afternoon, shadows long, the sky bruised with the coming dusk. Eleanor sat on a flat stone, overlooking the valley, her father asleep behind her, and Kaya standing watch near the horses. The moment should have been peaceful, but it felt heavy like a hush before the breaking of glass. She watched him, the way the fading light caught the edges of his shoulders, the way he stood, as if carved from the very cliffs around them, a man both part of the earth, and apart from it. Her heart ached with an impossible thought. What if this is the last evening I have with him? When he came to sit beside her, he carried that same stillness. But she saw it now for what it was: discipline, strength, and a quiet sorrow that never left him. They will come again, he said after a long silence, his voice as steady as the stones. Men who believe what we carry is shame. Men who will not forgive. Eleanor nodded, her hands folding in her lap. I know, but I can't. Her throat tightened. I can't go back to pretending. I can't go back to living half a life. His dark eyes softened, and he reached for her hand. His touch was rough but careful, like someone handling a bird with broken wings. Then we do not go back. Her breath caught. What do you mean? We move farther than they can reach. There are valleys they do not know, rivers that do not cross their maps. A life waits there. If you will come for a moment, she saw it, the dream shimmering before her. A home by hidden waters, a child growing under the wide sky. Days where fear could not find them. She wanted it so badly she thought her heart might burst, but fear, always fear, whispered cruelly, what if they never stop chasing us? What if your people do not accept me? What if Kaya silenced her gently by lifting her chin, forcing her eyes to his? His voice was low, steady, a vow and a plea. You are mine, and I am yours. That is enough. The words sank deep into her, warming the coldest corners of her heart. She leaned into him, and for the first time since their confession, their lips met not as a stolen moment of desperation, but as a truth sealed between them. The kiss was soft, almost reverent, yet beneath it burned a fire. Neither had words, for Alex's hands cradled her face, holding her as though the world might end around them. But this he would not let slip away. When at last they parted, she whispered, would it be all right if we had this forever? His forehead rested against hers, his breath unsteady. Forever, if the earth will allow it. Behind them, her father stirred, coughing weakly. Eleanor pulled back, guilt tugging her heart, but Kaya only laid a hand on her shoulder. Go, he murmured. He needs you now. She rose, but as she looked down at her father, something inside her shifted. For the first time, she did not see him only as a dying man, but as someone who had lived hard, carried his own sins, and at last, chosen to bless her love instead of curse it. When her father's eyes opened, cloudy but aware, he rasped, you too look like the sun itself. Is keeping you? His lips trembled with a faint smile. Don't waste what little time the Lord gives. Eleanor's tears spilled freely. She kissed his brow, whispering, I won't, Papa, I promise. As the sun dipped low, casting the canyon in golden flame, Eleanor sat between the two men who had shaped her life, one fading, one burning steady, and she realized she could not keep both. The choice was already made. This was the last sunset of her old life, the last quiet moment before the storm returned. Tomorrow, they would face the world again. But tonight she belonged to him, and he to her. And that truth was enough to carry her through whatever darkness waited beyond the horizon. The night had fallen heavy, stars spilling like scattered fire across the desert sky. Eleanor sat awake by the fire, her father finally sleeping in peace, his breaths shallow but no longer painful. The hush of the canyon felt almost sacred, as if the earth itself held its breath for what was to come. Kaya returned from scouting the ridges, his steps soundless, his figure outlined by moonlight. She knew by the way his shoulders sagged that he had seen what he feared. They are coming, he said softly, riders. Too many. At dawn, this place will no longer be safe. Her heart twisted, then we'll leave. We can ride tonight, but he shook his head. Your father cannot travel. He is too weak. If we try, we will not make it. They will find us on open ground. The words cut through her hope like a knife. She pressed her hand to her mouth, tears hot against her skin. Then what? What will we do? For a long moment, Kaya said nothing. His gaze lingered on the fire, flames flickering in his dark eyes. When he finally spoke, it was not with fear, but with the steady, low tone she had come to love. I will lead them away. Draw their eyes. By the time they return, you and your father will be gone, safe beyond their reach. Eleanor's chest seized. No, she gripped his arm, her voice breaking. You can't ask me to watch you ride into their hands. I can't. His hand covered hers, strong, grounding her even as her world shook. I am not asking, Eleanor. This is the only path left. Tears spilled faster now, blurring his face. And what of us? What of everything we just found? You said forever. His eyes softened, filled with something deeper than sorrow, something eternal. Forever does not always mean on this earth. The words shattered her, yet in his tone she heard a promise that reached beyond the life they knew. Slowly, almost reverently, he drew her into his arms. She melted against him, clutching the leather of his vest, listening to the thunder of his heart. That sound had become her anchor, her truth. His breath stirred her hair, and then came the words she would carry for the rest of her days. "Can I hold you?" he whispered, as if asking permission to breathe. As if every second of their closeness was sacred. She broke, utterly sobs, shaking her body as she buried her face in his chest. "Yes," she whispered fiercely, clinging to him as though her grip alone could change the fate he had chosen. "Yes, hold me. Don't ever let go." He did. He held her as if she were the only soul in the world. His arms were strong, but his embrace was tender, a cradle for her breaking heart. He pressed his cheek to her hair, his lips brushing the crown of her head in a kiss that was both a vow and a farewell. The night stretched on, timeless. They did not speak of tomorrow. They did not speak of fear. They only memorized each other, the feel of breath, the warmth of skin, the rhythm of heartbeats locked together. When at last the fire sank low and the stars wheeled overhead, Kaya pulled back. His thumb traced the tears on her cheek, his eyes, steady, though hers blurred with grief. "Remember me, not as one who left," he murmured, "but as one who loved beyond life itself." Her lips trembled. "I'll never forget. Not one breath. Not one heartbeat." And then he kissed hers, aching, deep as though trying to pour a lifetime into a single moment. It was not a kiss of beginning, but of eternity, something that would echo long after his shadow left her side. When the first pale light of dawn touched the canyon, Kaya stood, saddled his horse, and looked back one last time. Eleanor remained where she was, arms wrapped around herself, as if still holding the ghost of his warmth. Her father stirred faintly, but she barely heard. Kaya mounted, his silhouette sharp against the lightening horizon. For a moment, he did not move. And then just before the sun rose, he lifted his hand in silent farewell. She raised hers, tears streaming unchecked, her heart breaking and healing all at once. Then he rode, away from her, into danger, into legend. And though Eleanor's arms were empty, she knew one truth would never leave her. She had been loved fiercely beyond measure, beyond life itself.